Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Self-Care Matters with VB, a channel dedicated to the promotion of self-care. Today's episode is a continuation of understanding and managing stress better. In the last episode, I talked about stress and stress response. In case you missed it, I would encourage you to watch that as an introduction to what we are talking about today. Today, I'm talking about types of stress, signs and symptoms of stress, so that you can identify when you are actually experiencing it, how it impacts you, and in the end, as always, I will share a stress management strategy with you. So as you know, stress is our response to an event. It is our response to an event that we perceive as threatening. And that perception is based on our assessment of the situation and also of the available skills and resources that we have access to. If we feel that the demands of this situation outweigh the skills and resources that we have in order to deal with the situation, then we find it stressful, right? So your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, your hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline, they sort of get released so that you get pumped to be able to deal with the stress. It is an adaptive response. It's a good response because in that moment, it kind of sort of, gets you going. It might motivate you. It might give you sort of, energy to deal with the situation. The unfortunate part is, sorry, that our threats are not physical anymore. We don't have to run away from a tiger, right? Most of our threats are psychological right now. A child getting sick, a confrontation with your partner or your coworker, a big expense, those kinds of things. And also, we don't have a start and end point to the stresses that we feel in our lives nowadays, right? So those are the things that we need to sort of keep in mind when we are looking at what is stress and how it's impacting us. So what kind of situations do we find stressful? Any situation that demands change, creates instability, a fear of the unknown, or clashes with our expectations can be stressful. So changes in job or relationship status, a move, loss of a loved one through death or a relationship breakdown, those are all have been known to be high stress situations. However, situations don't have to be negative all the time to be stressful. Even quote unquote positive situations can cause stress as well, such as getting married, having a child, getting a promotion, because those push you out of your familiarity, comfort zone as well, right? So stress impacts our physiology, thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Let's talk about the types of stresses before we go into the signs and symptoms, though. There are three types of stresses: acute stress, episodic acute stress, and then chronic stress. We'll be covering chronic stress, the most harmful one, in the next episode because it needs more explanation and more time, as it is associated with quite a few chronic diseases as well. So I want to be able to explain, do it justice, basically. So today, the first thing that we are talking about, the first type of stress, is called acute stress. It is the most common form of stress, which comes from demands and pressures of the present and near future. This is the kind of stress most people can identify with, such as getting into an auto accident, rushing to meet a deadline, and that sort of thing, right? This, as I said, on the spot kind of stress, when it gets you pumped up, can really be helpful because it gives you the energy and the motivation to deal with the situation. The second type of stress is episodic acute stress. This is basically more frequently experienced acute stress. Because it is experienced more frequently, obviously it activates your stress response more frequently, which is not really helpful for your system. It's like driving with the brakes on, where you feel you are on the go all the time, but not with much productivity, though. As you may recall from the last episode, it takes anywhere between 20 to 60 minutes for us to go back to our pre-arousal state, right? So when we experience episodic acute stress, which we are experiencing quite frequently, our system may not even get any sort of break in between, so risking a burnout, right? And this can be really hard on various sort of bodily systems because of the continuous release of cortisol. We'll be talking much more in depth about cortisol and its role in chronic diseases in the upcoming episode. Now let's talk about some of the signs and symptoms that you may experience when you're undergoing stress. Some of the short-term symptoms include faster heartbeat, increased sweating, cold hands and feet, butterflies in the stomach, rapid breathing, tense muscles. I mean, if you think about, going for an exam or an interview, that would be sort of an example of a short-term stress, which kind of gets you pumped for that particular sort of so-called threat. But then after you remove yourself from that threat, the signs subside because, you calm down after that. Some of the signs and symptoms of long-term stress include changes in appetite, where you may find you are not able to eat because Nausea is also one of the symptoms. Basically, your body, when engaged with the stress response, disengages from the digestive rest and digest response. So, that might upset your appetite, or you might find yourself eating more because you are using food as comfort. You may experience changes in your sleep pattern. You may find that you're not able to sleep because you're worried and really wound up, or you are sleeping too much, maybe as an escape, right? Not wanting to face the reality. You may experience frequent colds, indicating maybe lowered immunity, digestive issues, headaches, weight gain or loss, feeling exhausted, and shoulder or back pain. One interesting sort of tidbit is that apparently women tend to carry their stress in their upper backs, which I can vouch for, I do, and men tend to carry their stress in their lower backs. So I found that interesting, actually. Stress also impacts our feelings. You may experience feelings of anxiety, panic, irritability, moodiness, and fear. It can also impact our cognition or thinking. You may experience forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating or remembering, difficulty making decisions, mental disorganization, and excessive worrying. You may also experience fear of failure and negative self-perception. This I've seen often. People tend to lose self-confidence and they become very self-critical. I think we should be exercising self-compassion at any given time, but especially when we are dealing with stressful situations. So now that you know what stress is, how you can identify that you are experiencing it, what can you do about it? Right? That's the next question. Well, luckily, there are several things actually that you can do. As you'll recall, in the last episode, which I will link in the description box below, I discussed a breathing technique called box breathing, a very effective yet simple technique. If you haven't watched it, I would encourage you to do that and continue to practice that. That is really very effective and helpful. So today's stress management strategy has to do with our thinking, feeling, and behaviors. So if you remember from the last episode, there are two things that come together to create a stressful situation. Our external demands or pressures and internal demands and pressures. So if we were to use COVID situation as a stressful situation, the external demands or pressures would be the COVID protocol, isolation, masking, economy having to kind of slow down, no bars, no restaurants, those kinds of things, right? Limitations. So those are the external pressures that some people are finding very stressful. And the internal demands or pressures are created by our own wants, feelings, desires, expectations, and attitudes. So, in the COVID situation, we know the COVID protocol is the part of the external demands, but our internal sort of pressures are being created by our desire to have our pre-COVID life back, right? So what we have found is the bigger the gap between the internal pressures and the external pressures, the bigger the conflict between the two, the higher the stress level. So in some ways, if you can minimize that gap, it would minimize your stress. In fact, I think it was at the end of last year, there was a survey done in terms of how much stress people were experiencing due to pandemic situation. And it was reported that people who did not resist the COVID protocol ended up feeling less stressed. And it makes sense, doesn't it? You know, they are not fighting the external. They are more adaptable, more sort of accepting of the change. So it's easier for them to, I guess, adapt. And because of the, shorter distance between their internal and external pressures, they are feeling that they are not as stressed. So in any given situation, even if you are using a thinking strategy, one of the things that you want to do is step back and deep breathe. No matter what kind of strategy you're using, you want to integrate deep breathing, because deep breathing disengages your stress response. It helps you respond to a situation instead of reacting to it. So you can influence the situation more, really. So, as I said, box breathing is a very good technique. In the upcoming episodes, I'll be introducing more breathing techniques as well. They are all very simple yet effective stress management strategies. I guess that's about it for today. I hope this has been helpful. I thank you very much for your time. I hope to see you again soon. Until then, please be kind to yourself and to one another. And bye for now.